Okay, welcome back to our series about question and answering in an engineering and science context. This is Unit 3 about answering the question. Communication itself is not easy, not to mention in an EMI setting. The main goal of teaching is to help students learn and to help them based on their individual's needs. Answering students' questions is very essential. So this is the outline. Previously in Unit 1, we've talked about a lot of different challenges, right? For example, all of these will make your case of interacting with the student very, very different. But in this unit, we're going to talk about a few examples about answering questions. Okay, so this is the first example. If you read through these, okay, this is actually from our previous unit. Okay, the student says, I don't understand how to solve homework problem 1. Can you help me? TA says, sure. What part of the problem do you need help? Student says, I don't understand what combination is. And then the TA said, I see. Do you know the definition of combination? And then the student says, I think I have some good idea about what it is. Then the TA said, what? We're getting familiar with the meaning of combination, and will this formula help you? And the student acknowledges, and then the TA said, okay, let's go through the contents. And then actually, the TA could start talking a lot about the theory. Okay, but at the end, about this answering part, the TA said, does this help clear up what a combination is and how to calculate it using the combination formula? So this is actually the TA asking for feedback from the student. This is actually very important. This is very critical. I think this is very good. Okay. And then the student responded, yes, I believe so. Then TA said, say, can you try to explain it back to me in your own words? And also the TA explained, this will help me actually make sure you've understood the concept clearly. Then the student said, okay, let me see if I got this right. Okay, a combination is when you choose a certain number of items from a bigger set. But unlike permutations, okay, there's also a comparison here. The order in which you pick the item doesn't matter. All right, so this is actually perfect. The TA even made sure that the student understood. So the following is a second example. So the student said, I don't understand why we divide the square deviations about the sample mean by n subtracted by 1 for the sample variance. Okay. Excuse me. So the student seems very, very specific on what she or he is trying to ask, right? Then the TA say, I see what you are saying. Well, that way we get an unbiased estimator. Then the student say, oh, I don't understand. Okay. Then the TA said, because when we divide by n subtracted by 1, the expected value of the sample variance is the population variance. And the student provided some feedback like, okay. And then the TA ended the conversation. Okay. But within this conversation, you can kind of see that from the first response from the student, like this one, the students might not be really following. So it would be great if the TA can kind of check what is the condition of the student, how well is the student following up, right? But the TA just keeps talking, right? So this is a slightly different condition, okay, when the TA responded differently. So the first part is the same, and then the student actually expressed that, oh, I don't understand. And here the TA said, well, can you let me know where I can talk more to help you understand? Ah, this is a very, very good question, okay. Seeking feedback from the student to see what the student requires, right? What is the student feeling, how we can help, right? And the student said, well, I don't know what is an unbiased estimator. Ah, because within the TA's answer, the TA used the word unbiased estimator, right? So now the TA can focus on what the student do not understand. So the TA said, well, I see an unbiased estimator is when the expectation of a statistic is same as the population parameter. Okay. This is actually a typo. Okay, sorry about that. And the student said, I see. Okay. And then the TA, maybe I am not being very clear. This is actually also a very good question because the TA, I think, kind of sensed that the student is not fully understanding the uh, within the conversation. So the TA asked again, right? And then the student said, well, now we're splitting this with two cases, right? So for the first case, maybe the student will say, yes, you are being clear. Thank you for your help. Then basically, um, the TA's job is done, right? But there might be like a different case. The student say, no, like, no, I don't think you are being very clear, right? No, it is not very clear to me. Then the TA say, okay, let me go through the contents with you, maybe together with some math notations for clarity, right? Then maybe the TA can go through the theory but very important, just like the very first example we went through, the TA asked, right? Does this make the concept clearer, right? You're seeking feedback from the student. Then the student can give you a positive or negative response. So in the following is the third example. It's about the TA talking about like sample variance, but then the student gave some response. The TA keeps talking, and then I think the TA is also marking some math notations and definitions on the blackboard. And this is the student's response. It shows spread from middle, okay, because the TA asked um, um, about, well, they're having a conversation about variance, right? And what variance mean. But kind of, if we are reading through the lines of the responses from the student, you can get a feeling that maybe the student is shy, or maybe the student's mastery of English is relatively um, lower, but the conversation seems to be still going, and it's still flowing, and the student is still asking questions, and the TA is like still having a good conversation with the student. I think it's because the mathematics is there. Okay, this is just to strengthen you guys that we are in an engineering and science domain, right? Usually, if we are interacting with the student is asking a question or trying to answer a question, and you feel like maybe the conversation is not being as successful, you have a lot of tools, and math is definitely one of the tools that you can use. Okay, and actually, the student is actually being uh, very informative because the student is asking more questions or providing good feedback, even when the TA is not really paying attention to whether the student is understanding or not. Okay. Okay, there are methods, right, for us to have a better question answering. Just like when we talked about just like in the previous unit when we talk about understanding students' questions, when you are answering the question, you also need to be patient. Okay, you need to listen to what the student is providing to you, the feedback. You need to take it slow to make sure that the student understands your logic because you are trying to solve the student's question. Okay, you need to pay attention to the student's feedback to you. Also, the common language in engineering and science, the math notations can help you greatly. Just like before, we've talked about Google Translate. If you think it's needed, definitely use it. Take advantage of it. Rephrasing and to seek confirmation from the student when you are answering the student's question is very important, okay? Because you also want to make sure that the student really understands what you are saying, uh, so that you do your job successful, right? You're the teaching assistant. And just like before, like last time in Unit 2, we've mentioned it's always important to ask for details about the answer itself, right? To make sure that, to double check the student understands your answer. Here are some reflection, okay? Did you, the TA, gave the student the opportunity to give you feedback on your answer to the question? Okay, this is very important. Was there a language barrier? Did you feel it? Okay, if there was, did you try to solve it through some other ways like math notations, body language, using Google Translate, something like that? Okay, have you made sure the student understood your question? Did you confirm with the student? Was the student comfortable with the interaction with you? You could actually feel it, right? Either from their facial expression or body language, or even the questions they ask, or if they have provided feedback to you. Were you, the teaching assistant, fair and respectful to the student? This is also very important. Okay, did you judge based on the look of the student, based on the gender, based on anything? That is not right, right? You have to be fair. Is it okay to not know the answer to the question? Definitely. It's okay if you don't know the answer. Just let the student know. Maybe you need to come back to the student. Next time you see the student, you will provide the question or ask for the email. You email the answer to the student, or you could even ask the professor, right? Whether the professor can also help on that student. And just like what I've mentioned in the previous unit, you can always learn from the professor, right? You can seek for help from the professor. You can also discuss about your interaction with the student, with your professor, and you guys can have a very good experience, exchange, and to learn together. All right. Thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed the series and learned something.